Hello, hello. It's Tidbits from the Love Notes. How you doing? Well, we're still continuing on this topic of the pure heart, and there are different parts about it, that I thought would be good to share. And so we shared last times about things that displease God. They're called sins against God, and basically we who have loving hearts are faced with this kind of thing. We're confronted with it. I know last times I talked about being confronted with being mistreated, and we shared about that when you've been personally mistreated. And we notice that doing mistreatment, the main thing is that we have to do forgiveness. And um, and 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 it's like forgiveness isn't the only thing that's like a sin, because we talked about the different sins. We talked about thinking and plotting against people in unholy ways, and then using unholy language, that kind of thing, and then not forgiving as God has forgiven us. So that's just a rehash of that. And so basically we notice that people who the main one is this not forgiveness. People just will not let go and forgive people for any wrongs they've done, and we've all done wrongs. And so this unforgiveness, like I said, is the main one. And people who really hold on to things a long time, they really don't have a lot of joy. Um, the more they think about the sin, it just makes them so unhappy. And, it makes God unhappy, our unforgiveness. When we do that, people that live in that lane of they just won't forgive, they're very unhappy, and God is unhappy with them because they've sinned against Him, because He has forgiven them. And the more one sins, the more God's unhappy, and the more the person is unhappy. And then when we get to a point, a person that's not forgiving or planning unholy plots or saying unholy language about a person for what they've done wrong, basically they don't have the joy, and they're not sorry. They're not sorry for that they're being that way, and they don't want to change. They don't want to change. They're stuck on it, and they imagine bad things are going to happen to them, that certain people are going to be better than they are, people are going to do better, and they're very displeased with themselves, but they won't change. And God is displeased with them for how they are just digging their heels into this sin. And then if the person has no plans to become better and new, they just have a bad time all the time. They cycle right back into this unforgiveness and thinking these terrible thoughts. And it can be in a home, it can be in a person, it can be in an institution, and this continual sinning. And forgiveness is the hugest one. And so the spirit stands still when people do these things that sin against God. The spirit stands still, and they can't grow, they can't get better. And sin is always linked to everything they talk about. They're always talking about it. They can get off on a subject, but then they go right back to the sin talk again. They just continue. And we hear it going on in our country with leaders that talk something good, but then they go right back into sin again, and bringing that up, what they think is unholy, and they're being unholy doing it. And so they're either talking about what somebody did to them or what they're going to do to somebody else. And so there's no joy there. There's no joy there, and it's a sin against God. It really is. And so the plan for betterness is shared in Hebrews 10:26-2. And it's to follow the love of our loving God, because our loving God is forgiving, and experience that Holy Spirit within us. Let that Holy Spirit, ask for it, pray for it, that Holy Spirit coming into us to make us be a better person. And because when that happens and that Holy Spirit moves in, we become a person who can't just sin. It becomes very difficult. We get very convicted to do right. We can't say we're not going to sin and be unforgiving and be forgiving, and then go back and do it again and say, oh, it doesn't matter, because we get convicted because of our belief. In our faith, we become convicted, and we get closer and closer to God. And that convictedness makes us do rightness and think rightness. So tidbit number one, we need to read the Bible more and God-centered paperwork. And tidbit number two, go to church or some kind of God-centered services. And also tidbit number three, associate with people that are trying to do rightness. which is loving God's love and living God's ways, which is living a life of love and loving others as ourselves. Alrighty, so glad I got a chance to share with you. I hope you got something from this. We'll probably have one more talk about the hopefulness, and then we will find out what's next. Alrighty, love you. Bye bye.